Hello, everybody, and welcome to the episode 2 of Millennials. In the episode 1, I had a conversation with Ben and Jimmy, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce Ben first. Ben?
Oh, yeah, okay. My name is Benjamin Evans, and I guess I'm here today just to follow up on our previous video and just kind of get some answers from some of these super intelligent people on how I can become my own creative being, how I can create my own reality and how I can move forward in the process of transcendence, and complete happiness. So, yep, if you got any questions, I'm here.
And Jimmy?
Yeah, hi, my name is Jimmy, and I'm basically here for kind of the same reasons, but also, just trying to figure out the truth in the world, basically. There's so many different beliefs and ideas people put forward, and the only one that really makes sense is yourself. So that's kind of what I'm trying to learn about, is self-empowerment and how to bring that kind of ideas and hopefully teach that to other people.
And then we also have today Aug.
Hello. I'm a little nervous for some reason. Y'all have good ideas too. I've already heard some of it. I know of some of maybe most of you from other work. Yeah, I really just learned about the topics that we're even going to be discussing, really. But self-empowerment and spiritual awareness, and I think a big focus is reducing interference. And my main interest is basically the multidimensional nature of existence. I have a background with various strange experiences. That's not really the focus here. And most people who have had those types of experiences are interested in understanding consciousness and nature, or the nature of consciousness and existence. And it gets pretty confusing, but we can make sense of it. And a big focus on self-empowerment and spiritual awareness, and basically that whole idea, I think that's basically the biggest focus of this time. I think it's really been the focus of all times, but now we're at a point in history where everyone's kind of realizing that if we're not focusing on that, we're kind of being played in one way or another. And so, it feels good to be here, to be not capitalizing on that, but to be reinforcing that and hopefully helping others to do the same.
Okay, and then I will introduce Niels too.
Hi there, I'm Niels. I'm an author and musician, and I appear from time to time on these panels, especially with Lily. I kind of feel like your sidekick sometimes. It's a good place to be, though. What I think I'm going to try and do today is take a really big concept, like what it means to be a creator, and contrast that with a non-creator. That's kind of what I've been looking at, and as I look out in the world right now, we're having a really tough time figuring out how to communicate effectively with people that don't have the same belief systems as we do. So at any point in this discussion, I'll put my little bit in, which just kind of breaks it all down into, like I say, the difference between a creator and a non-creator.
And Trismegistus.
Hi, I'm HRS Trismegistus, and HRS, this is my show name. HRS stands for Holy Royal Spirit of Hermes Trismegistus. So all of you are in this treat for today, because I actually channel Hermes Trismegistus. I'm the incarnate of Hermes Trismegistus right here. So you can ask me anything you want about anything, and I'll give you the exact answer. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
All right.
And then we have Randy from Off Planet Radio.
Well, gosh, I don't even need to introduce myself. Yeah, I'm Randy from Off Planet Radio. And I don't know. We'll fill in the pieces on a very big puzzle today, according to Niels. So let's rock.
Yeah, let's rock. And I'm Lily, and I thank you all for joining me today. I really appreciate every one of your time. This is an important subject for me because I invest my energy and my time in a future of humanity. And so I think what we're doing today is a very important part of what I'm here to do. So I want to bring out and bring forth knowledge that I have or my own experience and share this with younger generation so we can empower ourselves. And this show is named Empower Yourself Now. So let's move forward, and maybe Niels, you can start kicking us into gear here, and let's work on that and bring forth our knowledge.
Okay. Already, from what I said previously, I already found an error in that none of us are non-creators. We're all creators. We're all participating in creating this reality, whether we know it or not. And that's the key point, is we want to be conscious creators. We want to be conscious of the world that we're actually creating for ourselves and that we share with others. So my key phrase for the last month or so has been alternative possibilities. And I realized that our difficulty in communicating with each other is because we usually meet as a clash of belief systems. One person believes one thing, another person believes sometimes radically different things. And this latest political storm has kind of brought that out to make it visible to all, where the other side of the spectrum, whatever side you're on, it seems almost impossible to communicate to these people because it's this clash of belief systems. I believe this, I'm right, you're wrong. I believe this, I'm right, you're wrong. And those two can never really meet. And our task isn't to convince each other that I have the truth, now I'm going to give it to you. In terms of freedom, if that's what we're looking for, and in order to create, you can only create from a place of freedom. Otherwise, you're just living in someone else's prison. So in terms of freedom, none of us can ever expect to have our own creative freedom unless we're willing to grant everyone else their freedom first. And that's the freedom for everyone to believe whatever they want to believe. You have to grant them that freedom, even if you think what they believe is batshit crazy. But you have to allow others to believe whatever they want to believe and to live with the consequences of whatever those beliefs create. So to bridge the gap between conflicting belief systems, it's where the alternative possibilities come in. That's what bridges the gap, is that we can find common ground where we can grant the other person's perspective that I see a possibility in what you're saying. I can relate to something in your perspective. And to find that common ground is much more our task than trying to say, I'm right, you're wrong, here's what you need to believe so that we can move forward. It's to make it, okay, I'm gonna even further simplify it. Someone who consciously creates their reality, as opposed to someone who's what I called before a non-creator, is, man, I'm losing my train of thought here, sorry. Okay, yeah, I wanted to just do a stark dichotomy of open-mindedness versus closed-mindedness. Closed-mindedness recognizes virtually no alternative possibilities. It doesn't reach out there with any feelers trying to connect with anything. A closed-minded person believes essentially that they already know everything that they need to know. There's no reason to reach out to try and connect with other perspectives because the closed-minded person says, I'm already right, everyone else is wrong. Now, that's an absurd statement, yet most people act exactly in that way, that I'm right, you're wrong. And that's kind of how we approach each other in our discussions. So our task is to be open-minded. If we want to be creators, we can only be open-minded. Consider the other side, a closed-minded person. What do they have to offer in terms of creation? There's nothing to inspire creation. A closed-minded person is essentially somebody who's running around their island of consciousness in the vast ocean and just looking at their own island. And from there, it's not the content of our minds that matters. It's the structure of our minds, the willingness to reach out and be open to all the alternative possibilities. Why this matters at this time in history is I think that we're facing a big reality check coming up, that the universe is giving us things that are really, really going to challenge whatever belief systems we hold. And that includes everyone here. I myself expect to be quite surprised at the events that transpire, say, in the next year. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be surprised. It's those of us who are open to alternative possibilities who are going to be more adaptable. And that's what growth, change, evolution depends on, is adaptation, your ability to adapt. So open-minded people, just by the virtue of being open-minded, are far more likely to adapt to the challenges that I certainly feel are coming, and I know others share in that. And so I'm just gonna sum it up again and say it's not the contents of our beliefs that matter. It's the structure of our minds, the openness, the pliability, and essentially the adaptability. So hopefully that's a place we can start from.
Okay. I'd like to go, thank you, Niels, that was great. I want to go back to Benjamin and Jimmy. And Jimmy said something earlier about he's seeing, or he's searching for truth in the world, and that each person has different beliefs. One person believes this, one person believes that, one person believes that. And I want to also have Benjamin talk about what are some of the challenges or conflicts that you are seeing, because you and Jimmy are representative of the millennials. And this video is a continuation from the previous video designed for millennials. So we can determine what are some of the issues that they see and they're experiencing, then we can possibly provide some solutions that may or may not work. And then from that, we have a dialogue everyone can just put in. So I want to go back to Jimmy and Benjamin and just kind of share with us some of the challenges that you're experiencing. And then one of us can interject with that.
Well, right off the bat, with what Niels was saying about multiple possibilities, I think one of the biggest problems is that the way society is shaped, there is no need for these multiple possibilities. You could just follow one path or one, purpose, so to speak, and it'll be all right. There's no reason to kind of explore these other possibilities. And I think that's one of the problems, is like, there's no real, where people don't see the value in exploring the other possibilities, as Niels was putting it.
Well, I think what you're saying is that you might see let's just say hypothetically, 5 or 10 or more different types of belief systems, religions, or truths, whatever, and they may or may not relate to you, and you're looking at all these things that are, quote, outside of you in the external world. You see things happening in the political arena. You see things happening in the entertainment space. You see things happening in maybe your own family. But all these things are all external to you. So I think it always comes back to us and what is our truth, or what is the type of truth that you want to experience. And if we can then determine what is my truth and then find the means to live that truth. For instance, I know a little bit about your background. I know that you're into music. You like Jimi Hendrix music. I think Hendrix is amazing. And maybe you yourself want to be a musician. I don't know. You can tell us. But if you were, and you said, hey, what I really like, my truth, that I just want to play guitar all day. I want to just sit up on top of my roof, plug in my guitar and my amp and just sing my heart out. And whether the people like it outside my neighborhood or not, either they will or they won't, or maybe they'll call the police. But I'm living my truth, man. That's what I want to do. So let's try to find out what our truth is, and then let's determine what's blocking us from living our truth, and then what are some of the things that we can do to focus on our individual truths. Forget about all that external bullshit. Let's find out what's important for us right here, right now. We can even go around the room and each one of us say, hey, my truth is this. I used to think that way, but now I'm thinking this, and I'm doing this, this, and this. And then everyone will get a consensus. When I mean everyone, not necessarily in this room, but the listening audience. Because it's all about, right now, empowerment. I believe that Lily wanted to entitle the show, Empower Yourself Now. So it's not next week, next month, next year, I got to take a course, I got to take this advanced spiritual retreat this weekend. It's right here, right now. What can we do right here? Anyone? Jimmy, what do you like to do? What empowers you? What's your favorite activity you like to do? What gives you the most pleasure, enjoyment, bliss?
I mean, actually, I just wanted to take a step back for a second. And I think the struggle comes with, at least for me anyway, I don't know if this speaks for Benjamin or any other millennials, but, you know, we're still so young and we haven't really experienced a lot of the world. So, like, it's hard to kind of grasp what I believe to be true or what my purpose is currently, because, you know, I haven't had the experience to, you know, say that this is truth or this is incorrect, so to speak.
But you can tell us what you enjoy doing.
I think I want to add a little bit that we need to go a little bit deeper than just enjoying doing stuff. We need to go into more of a expression of the energy of the self-creator and how we can become conscious creators.
So can I say something really quick?
Yeah.
Okay, so consciousness and optimism, like Niels is saying, it sets you free, you know, on a mental plane. When you're optimistic to any specific task that gets put in front of you, it kind of sets you free. So as in mine and Jimmy's specific case, we've been growing up with this optimism in anything that we do. It doesn't matter if it's scrubbing dishes until 2 o'clock in the morning. Though we hate doing it, the experience was worth it. You know, and we can look back and never regret, because the optimism that we share is what's keeping us going. But the problem comes when societal pressure pushes us in one direction. So we have no definitive answers on what is actually right. We just know that what we feel inside is what helps us feel good. It's what helps us find our dreams and acquire certain, you know, desires. But we just still don't know. There's so much unknowingness in this universe that it's hard for us to voice it, one, because we're standing against all odds. It's number two, hard to actually live the experience out, because you're going against the current. And that's just strange for most people, you know? So we dive so far deep into like this spiritual level of consciousness, but along the way, we kind of get lost or we lose hope. A lot of us lose hope and just give up on our own selves, on our own imagination, just because it's wrong. You know, it's wrong for you to think in a certain way. It's just, I don't know. It's a problem that I have. I can't express myself how I feel because nobody else agrees, you know?
Yeah, it's
Well, let me just say
societal pressure, right? It's
Yeah.
societal pressure that is the most inconvenient for you right now. So then what we can sort of turn around here and say that people like me here and, you know, Randy and all of us older people here, what we wanted to say is that we've been through that ourselves. And so if your biggest problem is the pressure of society, so we're going to share with you what I guess help us to stay empowered, because we've experienced that pressure as well. I know I have. I grew up in a oppressed, very oppressed society. So, and being aware and energetically tuned in and being able to see the invisible and live in a society that was so oppressed.
Yeah.
That, but having the internal knowing and having the eyes to see certain things, it empowered me to stand strong and believe in myself no matter what.
Right.
So I think a lot of us can share their own path with you and say how but the knowing and that spiritual being that you are, that what is living within you, you can feel it in your bones, the power that is given to you.
Yeah.
As a universal being. If you stand in that, you're the most powerful human being in this world. And there's nothing that can hit you, no matter how big that oppression is around you. If you fully embody a creator being, a creator spirit, if you embody that, you're untouchable by any kind of oppression. And that's what, and you guys both know me for a long time. And yes, I struggled with it too. But the only reason I'm here standing where I'm standing is because I trusted my own spirit. Always.
Incredible.
Always. No matter what society puts on you. When you experience yourself as the creator being of your existence, then there is nothing that can overpower you.
And I think that's
why, and that's why, I'm just going to finish, and that's why I think it's very important for you guys to understand that on this deep level, that it is the biggest power that you will ever have, is stepping into yourself. That is the only power you need to stand against any oppression, against anything that will come at you, because you are more powerful than any of it.
Any of it.
Any of it.
And that's where I think my beliefs of faith have come into my own life, you know, because I have faith in my own self and I have faith in the energy of the people and of the universe to kind of like correct itself. But, you know, I mean, I guess the biggest point that I've come to realize over the years is it all does come down to one thing, that one thing being yourself. Though your one thing is extremely complicated in a certain sense, it's also very simplistic. It's just, we have to find a way to think big enough, you know, we have to be optimistic and we have to work together, I think, just to just avoid all the problems that we face every single day, you know, whether we want to or not. So I think that's awesome.
I think the key thing that Lily brought up, and also addressing the millennials situations, is let's consider the ancient Taoists, Lao Tzu, founder of Taoism, because what's happening today is not any different than what's been happening 1,000 years ago or several thousand years ago. It's all kinds of conflict, people at war, people are greedy, people trying to wage war against others, etc. And all this, quote, stuff is creating all this discontent in the external world. So what the Taoists always recommended as part of their teaching is to withdraw from all that, withdraw and seek nature. So they were all about like walking away from battles, walking away from civilization, and trying to find like a mountain stream and walking down by the rocks, sitting down and just relaxing, and then watching the water flow effortlessly across the stones. And through that relaxation and through that oneness with the universal, you see the flow. What happens is you disconnect from the external world, and then you start to reconnect to your internal world, that aspect that Lily talked about, that is your true self. And the more time that you spend time in nature or by yourself, or as I said to Jimmy earlier about, that's why I asked him, what is it you like to do? And I gave an example of going on top of your roof and playing guitar. Whatever it is that you enjoy, spend the time doing that. And if you can't find a mountain stream like they did in ancient China, watching the stream, then go to some place that puts you at ease. Do something that puts you at ease. Disconnect from all that craziness out in the world. And then that time, the more time that you do that, you start spending time with yourself. And then once you reconnect with yourself, then the mind, the spirit, disconnects from the external, and then you're calming yourself down. And then once you're calmed down, then you're starting to get insights. Then you're starting to get ideas. You're thinking about, hey, maybe I'll write that letter. Maybe I'll write that poem. Hey, maybe that girl I saw in the mall the other day who works at such and such store. Hey, maybe I'm going to write her a note or give her a card or something that gives you joy. And the more time that you focus inwardly and disconnect from the external, you start to gain that power, just like what Lily spoke about. But it's not like you just say to yourself, oh, I want to, come to my inner self and my inner spiritual enlightenment. It doesn't happen like that. It happens in stages. And the first stage is to disconnect from all that external and then reconnect to something that gives you joy and pleasure.
See, but I think that's the hardest part, is people are not willing to go through that first phase. Is sometimes the hardest part. And when people face that struggle, at least in my experience, a lot of the people of my generation, my friends, they can't break through that first phase, and it's they just give up. It's no longer about themselves. It's about.
You're telling me that if a person your age sees their parents arguing amongst each other, they can't say to themselves, fuck this, and then go out and leave and walk down the street and enter a park and sit down at a park bench and just contemplate? You're telling me that they can't do that?
Well, they can do that. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, to some extent, they may not change. They may end up doing the same thing.
But what I'm saying is the more they disengage from that, and that's just an example of two parents arguing. It could be two politicians arguing. It could be escalation to war that you're seeing on NBC Nightly News or whatever. Turn off the TV, unplug it, walk away, do something that you enjoy. What is that you enjoy? Let's say the most mundane thing is, I'm not just saying you, I'm just saying an example. The most mundane thing is, I like walking around the mall. I go to the closest mall and I walk down the hallway and I just look at all the stores. Now that's pretty mundane. But let's just say that by you doing that, that disconnects you from that conflict that's at your home or that conflict that's at that news. As you're walking down, You might be Benjamin, and all of a sudden, wow, who's that girl that's working in that clothing store? And you say, nah, I don't think she'll like me. But then you say, hey, I'm going to give it a shot. And you walk up, you introduce yourself. Hey, I'm Benjamin. Oh, really? Hey, I'm Lisa. All of a sudden, you start up a conversation, and then now you have a new friend. Now you go home that night, and you're not thinking about the NBC Nightly News war that's escalating. You're thinking about Lisa, this new friend you just met. Now you want to write a poem to her. That could be a fantastic relationship.
Well, that's the key point, I think, too, Roy, is that sometimes people care too much, you know? I see that a lot in myself. I see that a lot in Jimmy. And I definitely used to see it a lot in Lily, you know? We care way too much for the satisfaction of other beings. And we take the punishment. We will be the punching bags for those beings because we just want to be happy. And if we're going to take a punch and then it will get that out of their system, you know, it's good for us. It's better for us to accept that, you know, or for some people, they have it to such an extreme stage that that's all they care about is the satisfaction of others. So they lose themselves entirely. It's like they're dead. Like Lily used to say in some of her other videos, dead souls, dead beings. So how do we face those monsters of society? You know, do we just retract ourselves completely?
Disconnect, turn away from it. Just let them be what they want to be, no matter what it is that they are, whoever they are, whatever that they're doing. Let them be and let them do that. Focus on what it is that you want to do.
So then the conflict comes.
Add to that, you just recently wrote a really great blog that is on that subject. Can you share it with us here?
I can think of like 3 or 4 that you're referencing there, but and there's a lot of, you know, maybe fringe kind of information on spiritual vampirism and parasitism, and really, you know, if that has to do with this type of supernatural or you know, extra normal entity or something like that, it really just indicates a sociopathy or a type of emotional pathology. That's really all it indicates. If it happens to be figured out, you know, and released publicly that these are actual interdimensional entities or something, that's, you know, we'll deal with that when it comes. And some people, what I think we're coming around to here is that, because there are a lot of common themes here. It's always about self-empowerment. Self-empowerment is usually always about creativity and creating your path versus the society or system you're in, or another person, your parents, whatever it is, an authority, and it's usually a false authority, creating your path for you through a belief system that's interjected in a variety of ways and facets and methodologies. And we're kind of, you know, to bring everything into a realm of locality, especially with what Trismegistus is talking about, that there's basically, you know, we're talking about healing here, and we're talking about coming into awareness spiritually, and we're kind of bouncing around the idea while slightly shadowing it and outlining it, that there's a stark resistance to that there's this type of techno distraction, there's a direct resistance in the methodologies that are being used to control people, to construct society. And we mentioned that a little bit with the way, basically the issues with the millennials or with the youth, and how schooling, society, the intolerance of alternative belief systems, and how we're not really giving multiple options, or if we are given options, these are predefined options that people were supposed to like file into, kind of like it's literally, you know, when you get up these metaphors, it's like a factory of some sort for people conceptually. But the other end of that is basically that we're coming into a age for humanity where spirituality is kind of hopefully taking center stage. And it has to, in a way, because if it doesn't, then the same thing that has been taking center stage and attention is, and that's going to continue to degrade, and what's being presented is degrading to the point where it already doesn't work. It doesn't produce the control or the effect. There's no coherence there. And so if it continues to degrade, it won't be able to work anymore. So the only thing that can happen is people finally realize what they've been missing, and the rest of the conversation is basically about what people are missing and how to go about attaining that after we come to the realization that we are missing something. And I think this very heavily has to do with spirituality, but that can go in a variety of different ways, from healing, or, you know, it touches on religion because they've been like combined and it's kind of corrupted in a way. But really it's about emotional healing emotional trauma, knowing yourself, finding your identity and expressing that, because that's where we gain empowerment to create, as well as we gain the enjoyment of being an individual. So when we're kind of being pressed into this collectivism society that's parading and disguising itself as individuality when it's really controlled and pseudo-individuality. And so we have this weird mimicry system, imposter system going on. But it doesn't really work. It can't work forever, because if it malforms humanity into something that is completely controllable, there's nothing else to control, there's nothing to gain from that. So it's only about the time that people realize what's going on, and kind of wake up to this aspect of self-discovery. And then the other aspects is that, because there's still more to go about the mental, emotional, physical harmony, bringing these aspects into harmony so that we develop a true central, core to our personality, which is dependent on what we have done, what we have experienced, instead of stuff that we're told. And that goes into the knowledge of the self. And then from there we get, more into these kind of, for lack of better terminology, extravagant belief systems or bodies of knowledge where it's regarding the true history of the earth and humanity, the nature of consciousness and the ability to create, how we are literally like reality generators, and that's been kept out of public view at every point in the world, at every step in how a person is supposed to, or led to believe they're supposed to bring change to the world. It's through someone else. It's through a higher power which filters that change and then constructs it in a mean that will develop into what that higher power really wants. We have to, we have to go through a middleman instead of just doing it. And so when people have been distracted largely through technology, through these kind of mind games, these polarity games where we get polarized towards one idea and we have to be against each one belief system or another, and it builds up this emotional tension which causes a resistance within ourselves to know one another. And if we're not trying to do that, we're not going to know ourselves, and we build up these personas that have to be these walls that are fake and have to be torn down for us to know each other, and then also within ourselves. And kind of what I'm getting at is that there's emotional healing and trauma that's been taking place throughout all of this. And maybe not the answer, but one part of that is to basically figure out the methodologies that bring one into what is called, or at least can be referred to as atonement in this type of spiritual expression, accessibility, or like health, spiritual health. And then from there are methodologies largely with like very basic forms of psychoanalysis, dream therapy, simple meditation, maybe Trismegistus skin. I won't look at him bad for channeling, but some of the stuff people do will get kind of weird. And so, simple stuff like that, and like they are saying, disconnecting from the system that's trying to think for us, that's trying to create a conviction of belief for stuff that we don't believe in the first place for us, because that's a mimic system. It doesn't exist unless we give it the power to, and it's been doing that for 1,000 years or more now, and it's not helping the people. It's not helping people progress. It's limiting their interconnectability and their awareness, and that effect, it generates fear and discomfort and distortions and lack of awareness, like we're kind of living out this repetitive nightmare in society. And so then, those are the other side, where it's kind of like the fear of beliefs, fear of each other turns into fear of ourselves and who we are, and then people are kept in a cage, like kind of like cows, where we don't want to step out of line because then we look like the black sheep or something like that, or maybe sheep is a better terminology. It's so funny how that, it works. It's just a similarity in biological systems, that a crowd of people being herded through fear and imagined constructs, it works the same with the sheep. With the sheep and sheep herding, that you can get a whole bunch of sheep to stay in a small little area with one or two dogs, and the the projection of fear or danger. And then even when that danger is largely removed, just the thought of going against the grain or the current, like Benjamin said, is enough to hold people back, kind of like goldfish where they remove the glass divider and they no longer swim to the other side of the glass, even though the divider has been removed. They feel, stuck in their ways. And or the 100th monkey, how that's the opposite of that, where once we begin to see people wake up and change and act differently, it spreads faster than the information could be spoken to one another, as if there's some type of higher etheric connection in between everyone. And so to wrap that up just a little bit, I think it comes down to what society really desires instead of being told what we want, and that to find what we want it's weird, but we want not everything, but what we get when we find what we want is more than anything we could have imagined, from the history of the earth to the nature of existence, the power to create, the biggest power that Lily was talking about, of the power to know ourselves and step into our power and decide how we're going to live our lives, and the feeling of liberation we get from that. And wrap it up is basically that the creation aspect is, and it's not a distraction from society, and that kind of gets in our heads, but the creation aspect is the freedom that we're kind of looking for, and that freedom to create is liberation from the ego. We're being liberated from that ego, where there is a restriction based upon fear that is developed from these toxic ways, basically we pick up from our childhood and through society, and if not through that, through various traumas that appear through that. So it's the same thing as somebody who's had a very traumatic experience, and they have to deprogram that and heal and recalibrate themselves and re-identify with the natural patterns that all of humanity is basically going through, from this mass effect of literally just being stifled, being spiritually, mentally, emotionally stifled. And we're coming around to that now with this conversation of realizing that that's what it is, that's what we really want and desire, and that there's all these inhibitions that have been holding us back for about 2,000 years now. And honestly, if you look into the other stuff, we've been here for a lot longer than that. And so there's a lot of energy to come from that. And then the only thing I can add, like truly add here, is that those methods of, the singing bowls and harmonic resonance methods with the meditation, some holographic healing applications in dream therapy and things like that, that I think are more or less going to become the path that our society starts to shift into, ultrasonic healing modalities for physical tissues, but for the mind and body of itself. And that ultimately it's all about resonance healing and coming into resonant sympathy with what we want to experience. And that even goes into the idea of connecting with the reality, which ties into, last thing I'm going to say, ties into what Randy was talking about with creating a literal holographic trajectory path of what you desire in time, in your mind. And it's literally, that's how it works, that it enters into the holographic code of the universe, if you will, and it begins to bring that about. And so I think the more people that do that, the more changes we'll see. And I'm not going to say everything's going to change, but that's what I feel.
That brings us into the conscious creation thing. And a lot of what we're talking about in the conversation has to do with reflection back from external sources. In other words, what others think, what others are projecting, how that is feeding back into our space. But you said it, we're reality generators, we're creating. And when you go into conscious creation, you begin to take responsibility for your creations. This is not the same thing as blame or guilt. But when you look at the reality stream that you occupy at this present moment, you have constructively contributed to that stream in some manner, energetically, consciously or unconsciously. You are a multi-dimensional being. So all your knowing is coming from the center of this being, this construct that you call yourself, but yourself is also actually multiple dimensional aspects of yourself that are not fully focused in the present moment. So while we're consciously creating this present moment right now, each one of us is reflecting, feeding back. We're creating a vibrational wave that enables us to communicate a concept. So effectively, we're taking responsibility for the creation that we have right now in this reality stream. So it's not so much about what other people think or how they respond. It has to do with you standing back and looking at the creation and taking responsibility for it, and then beginning to manage that in a way that is not so much egocentric as creating from a pure aspect of yourself. In other words, if you want to change something, you have to look at the situation, reflect inward, and draw on the creativity that you have inside of you, which is aggregate knowledge that comes from what people would call source or universal consciousness. It really is your knowing. You pull that into yourself. So everything that we have in our field right now is an internally generated and externally unfolded reality stream.
That's what I say. It's like we create our reality and we're responsible for it. We
Yes.
either consciously doing that or we are unconsciously doing that. And if we take responsibility fully and understand this one aspect, that we as a creator being are responsible for our immediate reality. So if there is something in our reality that is not to your liking, but yet we understand that we created that, and that means you created that unconsciously through some sort of either programming, pre-existing programming, or maybe that the spiritual technology that I used to talk in the past about, that is projecting the thought forms onto you, but you created that as a human being with a living soul, like you all understand here what I mean when I talk about a living soul, because we do have the non-living here as well. But as a living soul, you're fully responsible for your creation. That is what Randy's talking about. You taking full responsibility for your creation, and anything and everything that is in it is because you created it. The only difference is there's stuff that you created consciously, and then there is stuff that you created unconsciously. So if there is something that you don't like, you look into that, how you created, because you created it unconsciously, and then eliminate those programs that are running within you, or the effect of that spiritual technology that is making you create that what you don't want.
Most of our creations are unconscious. And unfortunately, that's the state of humanity. We haven't collectively, the collective of humanity has not taken responsibility for the creation. Because we occupy this universe, we have a consensual reality. We are my bubble here, my individuated consciousness projected into the space-time area, and then it agrees with you that there's a time stream. If we didn't do that, we couldn't have had this show today, because we had to agree on chronological linear time to do that. But within that agreement realm, there are all of these accidental creations that fire off as a result of the dynamics of this whole creation process, where we become passive consumers of somebody else's reality. And we agree to that. We allow that to happen. And it doesn't mean you resist it. It means that you then have to build another layer above that. There's a filtration process that pushes that back out and says, I reject that, I accept this, I pull this in. There are people who populate my universe right now. They're synthesized beings. I need to push them out. There are people who are toxic. I need to push that away. I need to pull more into my field that is beneficial, positive, nourishing from my experience. And then I take responsibility for that. And it's a constant winnowing process that occurs. So taking responsibility, again, isn't blame or doubt or guilt or fear. It is simply part of the creative process, just like if you paint, if you compose music, you throw parts of that away. If you write computer code, you throw parts of the code away as you're writing to build a better code base. So all these creative processes are acts of creating and discarding as we go along. That's part of the process. That's part of the joy, actually, of creating in this space. So maybe that helps.
That's the nature of this creation we're in here. And then understanding that on that deep level. And if we understand who we are, who we truly are, that we are universal creator beings.
And not be discouraged by the process. We have to learn to embrace that process as part of the dynamics. So, where we have pushback, where we have negativity, that's part of the creative process. And we simply use that. That's fuel to move to another level.
Yes, as a creator being, you direct any energy because you own, and whatever it is. And we've been we talked about it last time in the episode 1 about this, that you are in charge of that energy, be it negative or be it whatever it is up to you to direct it, to empower yourself in that moment. Because if that energy is in your field, you as a creator being can take control of it, and you can use it in whatever way you need it to benefit your creation. You don't have to be affected by anybody else's creation, but you benefit your own creation as a creator being, no matter what the energy is.
Exactly. And it's beautiful when you think about it. But I think my grandfather, he's a super religious guy, so we kind of butt heads on certain topics. But one thing he said to me was, he was kind of explaining to me the 10 commandments of life. And he said that they're missing one. He said the most important one, and one of the biggest things that kind of got me through my childhood was this alone. And he said there should be 11 commandments, and the 11th should be the first, because it's take care of thy own ass first. Because once you take care of your own ass and you understand yourself, your tool, your enterprise, whatever you want to call it, we as a creator being have the power to deconstruct or work backwards, because that's what we got to do to get out of this reality. And then we have the ability to attach ourselves to, the fundamental emotions that keep us going, that make us feel happy. Even when they make us feel sad, we have the ability to control whether we're happy, sad, emotionally strung, or agitated, anxious, whatever they may be. But then that's when, what Lily and Randy is talking about, where you have to accept the responsibility of it. That's where you define your own responsibility within every act that you do, right? Because you're creating your reality, therefore you're creating.
You absolutely do, yes.
So, and then you have respect for yourself, and you have respect for your life, and you have respect for the fact that you own every part of it.
Perfect. That's perfect, yeah.
Our work is done.
You said about the 10 commandments. Just take the first of those 10 commandments. Thou shalt have no God before me. Now, wait a minute. Back this up a minute. Are you a creator? Are you capable of generating a reality stream, a universe? Can you generate multiverses? Are you a Time Lord? If you are, that makes you a God. Therefore, you don't have another God before you. So all the other commandments are useless at that point. So there you go. Your grandfather's 11th commandment was really the first.
Yeah, and it should have been this whole time.
Just saying.
Only one.
Just one. Yeah.
But it's hard to articulate it, because there's so much science, there's so much religion, there's so much background that comes into it, So it's a huge problem that we're facing. And me not knowing. Go ahead.
The problem we're facing there was science and religion. Two big ones. Politics is the other one. Is that those are a bunch of rules. And those rules are set up to create cognitive dissonance in your reality stream. You don't need all those rules. Follow the first commandment. I mean, I'm not saying go forth and be a profligate, immoral person. What I'm saying is within the realm of creation that we have before us, all things are legal to you unto yourself. Now, that doesn't mean immoral, illegal, there's more rules to all of this. What I'm saying is that we have so much dogma that's given to us, and science is even bigger dogma than religion. I mean, we live
only
for
see one aspect of it.
Right. And that's the problem. Because in reality, what it's doing is science and religion are still trying to figure out three-dimensional space-time. We don't really know what it is. We don't know what God is. We don't know what a quanta is. We don't know what quarks and gluons and all of these other particles are.
No.
And trying to formulate them and put them into mathematical equations, as elegant as all that seems, doesn't really explain much to you until you understand that you are all of those particles, that you are actually assembling those things into a reality stream. So all the rules become unnecessary. You just begin to play with the concept. I'm multidimensional. There's other aspects of me.
Yeah.
I was talking about, experiences, weird experiences. Since I'm a kid, I've had paranormal experiences. I've experienced other realms, other worlds, other peoples, enough to know that this reality construct ain't as solid as it appears to be.
No way.
So, go ahead, go.
No, I agree with you so wholeheartedly that, it's the fact of when, because you're explaining your childhood as from birth. For me, it was always about, the next best thing. What can I do to get to the next task, So I've started to dismantle my own, configure, whatever. Okay, I'm getting lost. But anyways,
I like configurement. That's good. Keep that.
No, there's new scientists. Jimmy is a scientist, future scientist. But, I have a little bit of a news for those scientists at CERN. They're idiots. They keep looking for God particles. And told them, it's here. We found it. We found it.
And we don't have to slam particles against each other at accelerated speeds to do that. Why is it we got to violently blow things up and slam particles around to prove that there's a God particle?
Everybody needs their man moment. I'll tell you what.
Exactly. I like that. Man moment.
It might go very deep with what we're looking at with those types of experiences there. A lot of stuff is a surface layer, maybe public stuff, and you can look at all the weird occultic type of esoterica stuff going on. But the point we got to at this point, excuse my language, at this point in the conversation, it's basically like the main duality between Western philosophy and Eastern philosophy. How there's, in the Western scientific objective view, there's a linear ordered hierarchy of existence and creation with particles, and one particle must hit another particle, and they all have to add up, and there has to be a beginning. And from the beginning, there must be something that everything came forth from. There's actually a good video on this by Stanislav Grof, who's a psychotherapist, doctor / now like a very powerful researcher. So I'm going to sound like I'm like mimicking him, but the Eastern philosophy is that everything, some of the Taoist beliefs is that everything comes from a void, from nothingness, from emptiness, and we all, in a way, come from that peaceful emptiness through which all things are expressed simultaneously. And so in that sense, there's really no nothingness at all. And each side, one is determining existence from external, physical, heat, energy, and matter, material means, and one is looking subjective, interior, basically at an inner universe that only each individual can detect or experience. And then I like what you were saying, Randy, about because I think that's how it is. I mean, I've had some experiences, and they kind of described a lot of things with the quantum particles. They call everything that you need an electric microscope to see particles, but they're really all just snippets of wave energy that gets clocked and timed at a certain area. And it really, there's nothing particle about it, it's just a word that we just used to describe it. And when you add everything up, that the only particle part of reality is what you feel with your five senses, or your physical senses, five senses, your distorted five senses. That's the only particle part of reality. That anywhere else you look, in a macrobiological sense or a microbiological sense, you just get pure wave energy all the way down to the smallest format, where it's just identical parts of waves interacting with each other at different frequencies. It gets really interesting that brings out the idea of oneness and the reduction or removal of barriers. And when you look at that, you kind of, it's almost like a trick, like a puppet show or something, where we see a world here that we're in where our world's kind of being dominated by barriers, by this separatism, by the pains and the problems that we could, distortions that we could generate through experiencing ourselves only through barriers. And that was something that was said earlier about, I think it was Neil. It was one of the, because Neil started this whole thing off, honestly. You're like the grandfather of this conversation, about whether we're going to, this whole time we've been living life, experiencing each other, and at times, really having fun celebrating our differences and seeing everything that's different about each individual little detail and facet of our personalities and our beings. When in reality, we could do just the same, spending, if not the same or more energy seeing the similarities and how all the differences are really just minute compared to the fact that we're kind of like the same being walking around doing the same thing at different times in different ways, in different gradients of energies and intensities and formats. But so basically one last thing, which is going into, and also the self-responsibility thing is like the thing that I totally forgot to add in, which is that's like the capstone of all of it. Only when you take responsibility can you become a conscious creator, and then there's conscious and unconscious. That's the whole thing right there, basically, and the unconscious agreements, the subliminal, all that stuff. But the only thing I want to kind of add, which is also going to be like open-ended, kind of like a cliffhanger, which is that there are these kind of inversion methods that are either going on to create the opposite of what could be found if people follow intuition or their subjective feeling, or is it just a natural effect of what happens when you determine reality based upon these differences, these boundaries, or maybe it's the physical senses and the kind of middle macrobiological world for, to all the microbiological beings that are kind of composing our physical bodies, and even thoughts being related to quanta and ideas being microbiological, etheric beings that create our soul essences and our experiences in a higher realm. That there's kind of like an inversion principle where the more you look into the Western philosophy view, you get the exact opposite of what your inner spirit will tell you. And there's, I don't want to go into like mind control or inversion principles on how to kind of like control people by through psychological manipulation, because you can also very much just say that when you look at physicality, it's an inverted projection of the spirit or the awareness, what I call pure awareness, which is beyond consciousness, where consciousness is in a way like the shadow of that higher knowledge that has to express itself through contrasts and similarities and separations, which is basically duality and polarity consciousness. And that's just nature for a physical plane. But the kicker is that we're not physical beings entirely. It doesn't mean nothing is entirely physical. And so we're in this type of, it's kind of like a puppet show or a holographic projection system, and through that we can kind of like go to one path or the other. And it's honestly, I don't think there's like a death point in any of this. I think we can go as far into separation as we want, and then we just end up going back into unification and realizing what we were ignoring the whole time or what we were overlooking and things like that. And so it turns everything to this big, like a very extravagant, dreamlike show that we're all interacting in together collectively to experience ourselves and each other through experiencing first what we might not be or what we might think we are but aren't. And so I'm just gonna put that out there.
So the way I see it,
Okay.
Society, or let's call it the external world to make it really, really big, can only offer us pathways that are already created. Somebody else already created them for their own purposes. That's all external reality has to offer us. So what Benjamin was saying before, that it's hard to pit ourselves against society, against the external world, and going basically the opposite direction. But I see that as kind of a self-rewarding thing to do, because obviously if you're not going to accept the pathways provided by society, you're going to have to create your own. There's no other option. So just by choosing that, you're choosing to become a conscious creator. That's the first choice. And I say it's self-rewarding because as a creator, you're learning about yourself. If you're following one of the external pathways, all you can learn in terms of truth is basically a reflection of your own inner truth or truths that are created by other people. It's not authentic truth to be found on the external path. Where you're creating your own path, you're defining and discovering your own inner truth, who you really are. It's a path of self-discovery. And the more that you discover on that path about yourself, the more fuel you have for better creating that path. The more knowledge you have about yourself, the greater your freedom to create whatever is in your potential to create. So I totally lived through it myself. When I was your guys' age, I was totally lost and had no idea what direction I was going to go in. And I was desperately searching for these external paths. And, you know, I take 2 steps on any external path and go, well, this sucks. I don't want to go where this is going. And eventually I just accepted that I am a creator, and this path of self-discovery is the only thing that really gives me pleasure and keeps me happy is to keep discovering. I think that we are essentially creators / explorers. And as long as we're continuing to explore, as long as there's new exciting information coming in, that just keeps fueling our creativity to greater self-knowledge. The only real truth that we can get at is our own truth. And I just wanted to say that it is kind of a self-fulfilling pathway. Once you can get on that, it's about me. As narcissistic as that sounds, that's just the truth of it, is me first. And Benjamin said that with that 11th commandment. It's exactly right. Is take care of your own ass first. And I see that as a very self-rewarding pathway, and additionally the salvation for our troubled little consensus reality.
Yeah, a lot of people go after that glory, but they go through somebody else's path and just trying to prove that they're better than that. When I say, you know, it's the biggest reward and the biggest confirmation you'll get is it's when you created it. So I'll give you a little example. When I was a little kid, and I saw in the book a little seahorse, and I was 7 maybe or 6, and I wanted to see a live seahorse. And my older sister was telling me, "It'll never gonna happen. You'll never gonna see that because we live in this country and you'll never gonna leave from here." But I wanted to see that seahorse so bad, and I kept envisioning me seeing that seahorse. So when I did, which was like 40 years later almost, I almost drowned from the joy, because I've seen it, and I remembered instantly being 6 years old and seeing myself enjoying seeing a live seahorse. So when we were diving, and Jimmy can probably tell that, I almost drowned because I forgot about everything else because I was in that joy. And that gave me a huge confirmation that I can create my reality if I want it powerfully enough to experience. You create your own reality. And that was also universe showing to me that you can dream big, and you have to believe in yourself.
So it's ironic.
Everybody around you telling you that you are not going to achieve it.
It's ironic. The most empowering thing in the world is when you accomplish something that someone else tells you that you cannot do physically. And for you, it was your situation. But what stopped you from, coming to the United States with $100 in your pocket? Or I don't know the exact credentials of your story, but it amazed me the first time I heard it. And it was maybe that was the one moment that stemmed your awareness, that one seahorse. It could be so, it's just, that's amazing.
Experiencing that what to other people is just nothing, but experiencing that, it gives you power and it gives you self-belief that you know you're in charge. You are in charge of your reality. And it doesn't, nothing else matters. And you stand strong in yourself. And that goes back to take care of yourself and create that what you love and what you're here for. And that's why, knowing Jimmy and like question you, Jimmy, from a very young age. And I remember you telling me that when I would ask you, what do you dream about when you were a kid? And you said, Mom, don't you know, I dream whatever I want to dream about. I go and before I fall to sleep, I think about what I want to dream and I dream about that. Now it's real life. You got to do that in real life, not just in your dream. You are in control of your life. You are the creator. You just have to step into it.
So how important would you say the aspects of visualization are? Like visualizing what you want to do and then actually doing it, because those two go hand in hand and it's really hard to bring your thoughts into reality, So how do we deal with that?
I think that visualization is important in the feeling that it generates. I think it's actually the feeling of what you want to experience that is the important thing. Visualization is just a tool to make you feel excited about what you want to experience.
Emotions activate the resonance field that manifests. When you emotionally invest, you're creating at an energetic level.
Mm-hmm.
The higher the emotional level, see that everybody's got it wrong. That they think we have to be cold and objective and analyze the shit out of everything. Actually, it's the opposite of that. Nothing is impossible and everything is possible within the realm of emotion. That's why music, art, and things that inspire and galvanize you energetically and emotionally are important, because the emotion is what creates the arc for the energy to take manifestation. So the more emotional you feel, the deeper you feel it, the more you are generating your ability to create from that into the resonance field.
So is that why Jimmy was able to, tell his mom that he dreams whatever he wants to dream?
That's exactly what he was doing. He's a marvelous creator. That's what he was doing. Yes.
Okay. So that's why they say, when you're younger and you're closer to the other side than you are.
Little kids are much better at this than adults because they bred and educated it all out of us.
Right. Not only them, but animals too, and trees and the ocean. I think
absolutely.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, and to show you from a different perspective why that emotions, that power that we have, because if you look at the system and the parasitic consciousness that we have present here on the planet, why it harvests our emotions and why it, the fear, why it inflicts fear, because it's a very powerful energy. And so when you think at that, even from that perspective, that this is what's being harvested, that you can understand how powerful that is, because you cannot create by just thinking. You gotta add your creative source into it. It has to empower you. It's like a spiral. It gets moved by that, by your emotion, by your believing in yourself fully that you are the creator of that reality. So you power that, you give that energy through that, and you spiral it out into creation, that thought, because that's the most powerful thought.
The redirection of that energy.
Yes, you birthing that.
And that's the most
As a
powerful
creator being, you birthing that in this body, in this, your energy, you'll feel that. Sometimes when it's vibrates almost within you. And so when you direct that into creation, you can almost feel that spiraling into your universe. And you know that universe hears you that way. Basically, if you go down to the expressing of living light codes and all of that stuff, that's what you're actually doing. You're creating in that moment with your whole existence of who you are, because who you are is your source creator being in human body right here, and you're anchored in creation right here. And so to create, it's got to come from here too, including all of you, to manifest that into universe.
So I kind of want to go back to what Aug was saying about, death, the concept of death, and how you're just talking about how like all these things kind of entangle our thoughts and our emotions. So is that the reason why we don't get the opportunity to experience or remember that of birth and that of death? Because subconsciously we're fearful of that, occurrence. So that's the only reason we can't see it. And I don't know where I'm going with it, but
yes, me. Everyone.
Because we don't know what death is, right? But if we're able to create our own reality, how do we go through that of the birth process and that of the death process if it's ongoing?
I think I'll jump in unless that was either. I think this goes back to what I was saying before, and a lot of what we've been or what y'all have been kind of talking about kind of relates to the Western-Eastern split between determining reality. For instance, Randy just said, we're told to be cold, analytical, and distanced from what we're detecting, determining, or dissecting. It's a very effective way to experience reality through the Western philosophy. When in reality, we're supposed to be emotional. We're not supposed to be, but to achieve change, it works best through being emotionally open, active, and creatively stimulated. And then he ties in this whole quantum theory of entanglement, and it's really simple that the quantum particles are related to quantum entanglement, which is activated via the mind by thinking, by thoughts, and that is a coherence, something that generates coherence or decoherence with an image of what we're forming in our mind in reality, meaning we're more likely to experience what we're thinking about. The more heavily and intensely we create the image of that resonance, that vibration, that sympathetic resonance, where we're creating the same image of that within us, literally, wherever we experience the voice in our head when we read or when we see images, that's somewhere in our field, probably in higher space, which is usually how it's described, but that exists even though it's not material. So if we intensely create a charge through that process with something that we could experience, maybe on a kind of time stream way of looking at the universe. If it's a holographic reality and things you work through quantum entanglement instead of just you'd have to pick it up with a device and put it in your lap or something like the completely objective scientific standpoint, then that would make sense that it would produce a higher likelihood of entanglement and draw something into our experience. And I don't want to get into I don't want to get too fringy there. I'm just I like seeing the patterns that emerge and how basically we have basically two things that are happening. We have if reality is holographic and therefore consciousness is holographic, and awareness at that point, which is non-identified, it doesn't. Your personality is conscious, but your pure awareness is what's being aware through your personality. It's wearing your consciousness and your personality as, you know, a lifetime coat or something. But it has no identity. It's pure, and it's probably what would go on to experience other things that are probably happening simultaneously. And that's why it's kind of like a trick of laser light to see that this one life is happening here and now, and that's all that is actually happening, when really it's multiplexed, if you will, over the same channel.
You blink in and you blink out constantly. We are not in a steady state of, quote, beingness. Dimensionally, we are moving in and out of reality streams constantly.
And that frequency is taking place. There's a angular momentum, a spin to each of the quantum particles, and we're flashing on at a certain wavelength, and each time it's like the clock is going to a different hour. And when we get into when we experience who we are, we're just at a certain coherence where the wavelength hits always 3 o'clock, or, you know, whatever the clock is. And when we go to another, you know, whatever you want to call it, life or state of mind, dreaming, being, we're simply at a different wavelength. So we experience these different realities when they're actually all happening in a 360-degree view, but we're flashing in and out like a camera capturing frame rate, and the brain is producing the brainwave cycles that are capturing the frame rate of what we call Earth. Which I don't intend to go that deeply, but Randy already knows about this stuff. I'm sure most of you do as well.
Well, what you were talking about there is the analog would be the beginning and the ending of a movie. So your conscious experience of sitting down and watching a film, for instance, was a conscious beginning and a conscious end, but it was only part of a continuum within the framework of that particular experience. So when we talk about birth and death, we're talking about something that's finite within an infinite system. So you can remember your birth, and I know people who remember their birth, and many people have what they call their near-death experience, where they nearly died but didn't die but died, and then they remember it. So, you know, we're bracketing the infinite into a finite time frame.
It's like a circular reel where all the movies are contained, and they're happening like a disco ball at once, spraying out.
Yeah, that's a good enough. Yeah.
You can actually draw the devices that are used to tap into these other localities, and we are literally a line, a circumference around that, through which, as the disco ball turns, and it'll really be kind of like it will be turning this way, if you will.
It's aspects. It's aspects of a larger whole.
Right. Well, as each reflection on the wall shines around and moves, as the ball turns, we're just a line at a time that the points pass through. So we can't see the whole thing at once, otherwise we'll see everything. We can't have an individual single perspective unless we cut out every other degree but 1 degree of a 360-degree view. So it's this infinite versus finite reality that we have to collapse everything down into, and that goes directly back from quantum probability and quantia into basically collapsing into what we perceive as quantum particles. I think it's just a wave coherence where they become unified in the same frequency, just like a camera seeing the old cameras would perceive the frame rates on the TVs or the monitors, and you see that flashing effect. Now they're updated so that you don't see that. Our brains are the updated versions of physical form here, so technically they're degraded because we can't see into those other realities flashing in and out now, whether that was because of us.
Well, we can, we just don't. We can't, and that's the point of this whole conversation, because the whole point of this conversation is a normal person is going to say to you, well, that's insane. And I've had these conversations. Aug's had these conversations. Niels, Lily, all of us have had these conversations where you go into metaphysics at a level where you exceed what that person is ready to handle at that point. But the point is, we're breaking a paradigm here. We're breaking the paradigm that says this is a finite reality. This is what it is. There's no more. You can vote for Trump or you can vote for Hillary Clinton. You can have chocolate or vanilla. There's no strawberry. All you do is you get to choose between two choices all the time. That's the polarity that the physical reality wants to keep you in. Because if you dare step out of the boundaries, much less the fringes of all that, you're going to stumble into another dimensional aspect of yourself that's able to be infinite.
And it always comes down to making 3 from 2, from binary, that you create the third choice, that they always, it's not what
Yes.
they always give, but they're always developed.
Yes.
And this polarity consciousness between what is and what could be or what isn't. And if that's the only modality we have for experience, from there everything is programmed very easily through, if you have a person that believes only one of 2 things, and from there you can program a lot of stuff imagine you put props along the way, what's going to happen from there. At any point in time, if they develop the third, the trifecta of being able to create another option, it goes completely out of hand. You can't predict what they're going to do. That's the trinary effect. I'm going to wrap it up.
Right.
Because we develop like a polarity between what we want to see and what people tend to what's happening to them, what they're experiencing. It's all about creation. And I want to tie it into the holographic consciousness, because that's what it is. I think we all kind of captured where I was trying to go with that, and with Randy's help, how it's literal and integral to a type of, literally like actual scientific mechanism behind how this works, with resonance and holding the waves, the frequency, which is just what we would call spiritual thought or emotional vibration. That's literally the definition of quantum resonance with these particles that are entangling. But we don't see particles; they're feelings. And so we kind of see these two modalities coming out, where consciousness could be. And this also goes off of what Benjamin was asking about seeing the ends of the curve. Okay, so I'll try and describe this real quick. So from 2, you have a binary structure, which is a duality or polarity. Imagine like a radial curve, where you have, it's like the volume dial, how you have like the wide dot here, and then they get smaller and smaller and smaller, and they usually curve around the dial. So that's basically an analog curve, where it's not segmented in specific numbers or numerical qualities between 100 and 1 or 0. It's literally just a lot and then a little, and it goes a little until there's too much to be detected. So from that, and there's a whole much more to describe how that relates to consciousness, and how polarity consciousness as part of holographic consciousness as developed from ego, as ego develops from the birth. Spencer Eskridge just did a really good video on ego, and he described the whole process, that basically when we're born, our ego is pointing out, and our ego is absorbed at first from the mother, and really at first from the coldness, the harsh environment, because everything is perfect, and then it goes into, it's the Garden of Eden, then it's into literal hell, when, it's the destruction of the world that we knew before, and we're birthed into this world. It's kind of the same way going into the next world. But we develop our ego from what's around us, and through that we create our own image, and it depends on how we integrate with the challenges that we're faced. But we get this opposing ideology between creating ourselves and using emotional activation of that resonance field, like you said, Randy, and how that the interesting point here is that is generating a reality anchor, or a temporal anchor, where we can, like Lily said, experience something years later, farther down the line, and when we realize we played a part in bringing that into creation, then we get the years worth of reward from having that experience. Yet, where we can also see the opposite of that, where there's traumatic memory, and this is basically developing traumatic anchor through memory, emotional trauma, and that consistently degrades. Where you use your software, or your editing software, or your browser, to connect with the realities that you want, and to properly determine where you're going to end up on the screen or in the environment. And that is kind of related to suffering. And to break it down, it's like just experiencing what you are presented, the binary choices, whereas the other end of that is self-discovery and creation, where you must create what you want. You must project what you want. You can't go out and find what you want, because it's infinite in a world of finite shapes and realities, because we're in this type of finite projected environment but we contain infinite potential within us. And so we have creationary anchors, then through visualization, harmonic resonance, emotional clearing, coming to atonement with the different energetic levels of the body, going through the mind, dream therapy, psychoanalysis, stuff like that. And it goes back to consciousness being holographic through the creation of the ego as the outward projection of what we are basically supposed to be, depend on what we feel and how others perceive us, versus pure or true awareness, which is basically spiritual, but that just really means higher dimensional, meaning it is the entirety of that sphere that's shining out light that we only see one frame of at a particular life or a particular time based upon a particular individual, because we can't all just be God all simultaneously at once. It doesn't make sense that way. And it's more fun because then there would be no growth back to that. The radial dial wouldn't be a curve back into anything. It would just be a straight line, and then the probably just flow. There's no mechanism behind that. But we also get the opposite of that, where there is the acceptance of rejection, where we're told we can't create something, we can't experience something, we can't have that belief. And then the opposite of that, where there's self-empowerment in the face of that disbelief, which is kind of what I was saying before, where we get, it seems that, and when we do that, it seems that that's the only thing anyone would ever want to do, is to look at challenge or disbelief square in the face and do exactly what it doesn't want us to do, when it's conductive or conducive for our spiritual growth. And we can see how the resonant flow that we create, the emotional resonance, develops, or the emotional resonance, the activation of that, develops a flow where we begin creating more and more. It's like a wheel generating and turning on the river, and it develops this power within us, this flow. It's literally like we're flowing interdimensionally now, where the camera's rolling, but it's coming from center stage of the galaxy. But the opposite of that is this harvesting emotional charge through the giving us ideals that are supposed to be what we might or might not want, and are always not what we would want at any point in time. And those are generating reality anchors where beings, where just people, sociopaths, can hijack reality and use other people to create the realities that other people don't want, but those beings want. And that, the more we do, it creates a draining effect instead of a resonant flow effect, where our power goes more and more into their generation systems instead of where where they're born from. And so then, the birth question with the birth and the death, it's like the binary duality. You have hot and cold, love and hate, or light and dark. We can go into the fact that ultimately there's no such thing as darkness, it's just the absence of light. There's no such thing as coldness, there's just the absence of heat. Then you can ask yourself, well, what is it if sensorily or sensationally or sensually you were perfectly 50-50, and it's very difficult to do this, but isolation chambers, deprivation chambers, breathing methods, holotropic breathing methods, lucid dreaming, things like that, hit these octaves of that wavelength in your system, your resonance system. What happens if you are 50-50 between hot and cold, and you're not one iota of your ability to detect it on one side or the other? It would be almost impossible to try and create those environments without using a deprivation chamber where you cancel everything out. And for instance, you're hot or cold depending on what your skin feels in contrast to the environment. So what happens when you go into a chamber, an isolation chamber, flotation tank, where the water is the same temperature as your skin, and your skin is the same temperature as the air, and you become one with the entirety of the tube that's in there, and your brain flips out because it has no idea where you begin and where you end. And so that's a way of finding that. When we do that, we automatically cancel out the two binary. It's a meaning of transcendence, or going through duality, or transcending duality, where it creates basically another duality which is larger at a 90-degree angle to the previous, and we enter into a different type of state where we can explore we explore the universe through a different parameter set of our experience. The idea is that if you see the duality as a positive and negative, and the middle as a type as it rotates, as it goes, kind of like a spiral sequence. Eventually, this becomes a spiral, becomes moving. And so when you see, it's like looking at DNA through the angle at that point, instead of looking at as a wave, like a volume turn or something like that for a dial, where you see a wave where it's up and down or positive and negative. If you see that it's actually moving this way, like a spiral, then you can turn it one way and it becomes circle at that point. So my theory is that that circle is the linear, reference or circumference for a infinite.
Okay, you completely
Filtered.
out. You're breaking out so badly we can't really hear you.
I was going to another one, it's a really deep one. As long as the earlier part with the dualities between them, my connection was going unstable, which is ironic. As I mentioned,
You're better now, so if you can repeat that last couple of sentences.
Well, kind of had an easier way to do it because you have positive and negative, and so we would see that as going for the radial curve, up and down. So then we can imagine that the positive and the negative are not two different things. There's just one thing that gets lesser and lesser until you get to negligible point, like light and dark, heat and cold. There's really no such thing as cold or darkness. It's just the lesser of the light. So what I was trying to say is that ultimately becomes a curve when you look at it instead of you have to basically how you transcend, you flip 90 degrees from the central point. So if you take a curve and you flip it 90 degrees, it becomes a spiral through space. That's kind of like our DNA, if you will, as our emotions code and imprint as we go through time, or what we call time and experience. My theory is that we're moving basically through that spiral, through a spiral of magnetic binary resonance. And when we're conscious, we're seeing the spiral this way, as one or the other in a continuous linear procession or progression. With a circumference around a 360-degree orb of light that rotates, and all the infinite points filter through only one finite two-dimensional depiction at a time. And so, in reality, when we change our perspective from the binary procession in time, and it's really weird ways to do that, where how you look outside yourself and go back in, or cancel out the, I don't know if anybody got the sensory deprivation thing, where you cancel out the perceptions of the brain, the physical senses, and the spirit or the cosmic awareness takes over at that point. There's all these methods, and they get really, really esoteric. But you flip your perceptions 90 degrees, and instead of moving moment by moment through time, you're moving entire segments of reality at a moment down a type of spiral of multiple segments of reality interconnected. And when we do that enough, that becomes the wave, the spiral of multiple higher interconnected realities. I have to draw it out to get it. And this is about for a long, long time. And we're at a point now where I can draw it out, and in time, and everyone here will understand exactly what I'm saying. But it's like a theory that's how it's working mechanically through quantum, theoretical quantum physics, and basically, technically, with the electrical activity of the brain, consciousness is for the most part holographic, and the way memories are stored, they're holographic. And so, how do you get the quantia of a informational disk of holography into actual finite perception and relate that to the infinite reality of spiritual awareness? I'll explain that better some other time. But the idea is that traumatic memory must incorporate itself into the binary pattern. You can't have non-separatism and still have a distinguishing between what's traumatic and what's not. It's all just experience at that point. And so that's when we're in that binary state, we're born into it. And so which is weird because we're born into it, and through that we develop the ego, and through that we know who we are, and through that we become infinite. So it's like we're born infinite into infancy, and we're like growing back into infinite quality or infinite experience, which that should be impossible. There's no way you can throw a penny in a well and it becomes an infinite amount of pennies at any point in time in existence. It shouldn't be possible, but it happens. It happens with everyone that comes to atonement or full realization of themselves as the universe. And so the trauma, though, is what makes that not happen. It gives us something to get over in order to have that experience. And so pain and all these things, these ideas of separation, of the discomfort of the sensations that we don't agree with, when the deprivation chamber, our experience is the same as the air is all one. When we're born, it's the worst experience of not being what it was before, and it's the first time we've ever experienced that, so you can't get any more painful than that. So these experiences, including some dream states, some mystical states, even some high emotionally charged states through dreams or love and life and things like that, they get kept in our genetic memory that we can't consciously activate. because I believe the conscious memory is kind of like the outer edges, the frills of the projection, where the core of that projection, that disco ball, say it was emanating out of it, that's our genetic memory, that's our spiritual memory, and it never actually moves anywhere, it changes, it just rotates around a circle, around a pivot. Here's the kicker, because our circling, spiraling energy is the conscious mind. The core that doesn't actually exist, that we can perceive, is where we are actually sitting, standing, perceiving each dot, each line around that projection spiraling around from the center out. So that core is connected through all of them at once, whereas each dot on that spiral must experience things linearly through a binary stream of consciousness, and from there we develop all these systems of organization based on separatism. Really complex way of explaining it. If I draw it out a little, I'll draw a diagram. I'll make a video on it, so I can just send you the link.
Well, basically what you just explained, what a Christ consciousness. So that's
you definitely know, because that's what they describe it as.
Yeah, that the infinity, and that's when you have that perception, that's your Christ within, as some religious people may call it, but that's basically what you just described. So thank you.
I think light, a coherent pattern opens up in that center, and our DNA channels light through that core. At that point, we become radio receivers for whatever the center place is that we can't see, which is theoretically some type of galactic core or cosmic central, like nexus point of self, which makes sense in my world, which this would be like the outer edge, the far outer edge of the wall where that disco ball is touching things, experiencing reality on, and we call it Earth, and it's just it's literally 1 square inch, within an infinite miles of what we can detect on this outer realm, where it's not even the absolute core center where all information is kept, more so intuitively instead of experientially. I think when we get to the highest level, we can experience it intuitively as well as experientially in the same spot. At that point, we're like, it doesn't even make sense anymore because it's all in one, that's cool too. Sorry for saying a bunch.
No, that was good. That was good. I got all of that. I wish you were breaking out, and it's a little bit difficult to hear you. You have some interference there, but so we're getting close. We've been at it for a while now, so I wanted to see if we have any questions, or if anybody wanted to add something that they wanted to add, or any subjects that we need to still bring up. And if not, maybe we can do this again.
I got a little lost along the way, if I'm being honest, but I managed to stick with the program in the sense that the girl that I asked out said no, but in my reality means yes. So this 2-dimensional plane that we're living on it's dissected and I guess portrayed in whatever sense you want it to be. Right? Or no?
The etiquette to that is as long as you don't abridge another's free will, because if you can get what you want when you control and power without abridging another's free will or doing harm, then you're in line with the universe, basically.
By the way, when the girl says no, you look at her and you say, what, are you insane? You didn't want to go out with a god? You tell her, I'm a god. I could have created a universe for you. You want some guy walking down the mall with a stick up his ass, right? Okay,
exactly.
So.
That's what they want, too. It's amazing.
It's exactly what it is.
You don't want that girl.
No, I don't.
You want the one that wants to create, for you to create the world for her.
With her, and experience it with everybody, not just her.
Yes, perfect words there, with her. Yes, co-creation.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I think I'm going to have to, Aug, if we don't do another group setting like this, you're going to have to do a part 2 on what you just, explained. So.
Anybody else wanted to add anything? Okay. Well, I thank you all for joining. I really enjoy this talk. It's for me, it's been very educational. So I hope you guys enjoy.
Well, As a God, I'll just proclaim right now, we do this again and we follow up on it. So there it is.
Order in the court.
Yeah,
Amen.
and talking about this and what we just sort of came to at the end is that's the empowerment that we have, is that, you know, if we change the perception, we become who we are, gods. And then the system or the parasites or whoever is that is standing in our way that wants to manipulate our creation, we can now safely just stand here and laugh at them.
Comedy is the best response.
And the thing is, those people that are operating for that consciousness, they don't have a sense of humor. They don't have the power we have. We have this beauty within us as creator beings to process whatever that system throws at us and have a good few laughs about it. And that's the way I choose to look at it and to heal myself from any of that. Because when you get this perception of you being the creator being, then that is just puny. It's puny, and you can really laugh in its face and enjoy the ride that is this life, with this expanded perception on who you are, that you are a universal creator being. And then you can create joy, and you can create that what you want experience in this timeline.
And I'd like to add that empowerment is your natural birthright. It's not a struggle. It's very easy. You just got to detach from all that external crap. And as I said earlier, spend time in nature, look internally. The thoughts will come out. Act on those thoughts. Act with all the passion that creative source gave you to act with. And you will achieve ultimate joy and happiness.
And just to throw something in, it's just the active expressing what's within us and taking responsibility for that, basically. Once we begin to do that, they create that flow, that cycle. It's like a wheel in the river, and everything basically goes from there, as well as humor may be the solution to like all of this in the world situation right there. Basically, in other words, raising energy, raising frequency, raising vibration.
Yeah, as you guys like to call it, it's all about vibes, right?
Good vibes.
Good vibes, and you can feel them. You can feel them in your bones. Always stick with it.
This life is a dream that you're dreaming with your eyes open and with the control to create whatever you wish to.
Beautiful. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Thanks.
I enjoyed this. Thank
Pleasure
you.
meeting all you guys, by the way.
Yeah, thank you guys for all the insights and empowerment. I really appreciate it.
Namaste.